Hi, this is Derek Murphy of creativity.com. I'm making this video to talk about the best way to outline or draft your novel. This is something I've studied for a long time. I probably started studying this 6 or 7 years ago when I was working on my master's. I was interested in writing fiction, but I could never actually get it done. I had a lot of short stories. Like a lot of authors, you have a lot of ideas, and then you kind of try to put them together, but they just don't come to fruition. So I started studying story architecture. I read all the books that you're supposed to study. There's a big difference between writing guides that focus on the writing quality and the craft of writing, and books that focus on structure and plotting. Personally, the other thing that's worth mentioning is when you go to a writing class or you buy a book on writing or the craft of writing, usually they're talking about the art of writing, which is generally more literary fiction or nonfiction. So, very well crafted, well honed sentences that are amazing examples of English literature and grammar, but they may not be telling good stories. And the interesting thing is that you can write very well and you can follow all the writing advice of the famous literati who really consider good writing to be the pinnacle of the author's career. However, good writing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make any money with your writing. It doesn't mean that readers are going to like your writing. For me, good writing, and good is, of course, subjective, but the easy way for me to measure whether or not something I write is good is whether people buy it. So if a lot of people buy my writing, I think it's good because I'm providing them with an entertainment experience that they're willing to pay for. If I get a bunch of reviews and they like it, that's more proof that my book is good. The weird thing is with literary fiction, you can publish a book that reviewers think is brilliant, but not sell any copies and get really terrible reviews from regular people who are trying to read the book because people tell them it's really important, but they just don't like it. I don't think good quality writing that people don't enjoy reading is something for most authors to shoot for. I think we can do better than that. But of course, this is your personal choice. If you're writing literary fiction or if that's what you want to do, that's okay. It's a different kind of writing for a different kind of audience. You will still have to learn the rules of that audience. Literary fiction is a lot more innovative in that they enjoy and appreciate writers who break the rules and do something new that they haven't seen before. Popular fiction is something totally different. Popular fiction is usually templated. It usually follows simple rules for every genre. For example, I'm writing young adult fiction. The majority of best-selling young adult fiction that isn't literary fiction, because there is some literary fiction, young adult fiction, but the majority of best-selling young adult fiction, whether dystopian or paranormal romance, or science fiction or fantasy, has a very similar structure that's generally based on the hero's journey. And that's true for most popular fiction. So for most big popular fiction genres like sci-fi or fantasy or paranormal romance or urban fantasy, thrillers is a really big one. For any of those genres, they all have their own rules and their own style, but inside of that genre, the top 100 best-selling books will all be very similar because they follow some rules. So for plotting or outlining a novel, you really have to know what's normal for your genre and what readers like and what they enjoy and what they expect from that genre. If you don't provide them with that experience, it'll be much harder for you to please them, which means it'll be harder for you to get good reviews and earn money from your books, which I think is always a great goal. I think if you write books that entertain readers and you enjoy writing those kind of books and your readers enjoy reading those kind of books, that's a perfect relationship that's going to also be profitable for you so that you can start to write full-time and make a living. I'm going to show you a couple things from this book I put together last year, which is the plot dot. This isn't actually anything very fancy, but it is, I basically boiled down the hero's journey into something simple that makes sense for me. There was always something that didn't really fit, and I've tried the snowflake method. I've tried, the books that helped me a lot were Plot Perfect, which has its own style. I've tried Story Grid and Story Beats. There's similar processes. I've seen some things that only focus on the character and they just focus on the character first and then try to pull a plot out from the character. That works for literary fiction and possibly for romance if it's very character driven. For popular fiction, you usually want, like I said, to follow something like a hero's journey. So the way that it works for me, I'll put a link to this somewhere, but this is basically how I worked it out. And so the way this works is that you have your ordinary world where they start off, it's just a character and everything's normal, but they're probably dreaming of something better. They want, they don't have what they want. There's a lack, there's a need, and they don't know what they need, but it's there's something missing. So it's an imperfect world. And then you have an inciting incident, which is a call to adventure. It could be magical, or it could just be, you know, a car crash or an accident, or something happens that disrupts their normal world functioning, and then they're trying to get back to the ordinary world. For the first half of the book, probably they're trying to get back to the ordinary world. They just want things to go back to normal. After the inciting incident, you have a first plot point, which is a point of no return. So they've kind of like, they're crossing the threshold. They've been invited to this journey, but they don't want to go through it. But then something happens, or they make a decision. They're forced to take a first step, and there's no going back until they see it through. Then you have a first pinch point, which is kind of the first, not exactly a battle, but it could be a battle with the antagonist or the antagonist forces. It's just something that it shows the conflict, and that the conflict is something real that they're coming up against. They're mostly still a victim in the first half of the book. At the midpoint, there's a shift from the victim to the warrior. So they've kind of been reactive the whole time. Things have been happening, and they've been trying to figure out how to stop them or how to survive, or they haven't really been focusing on taking action. They've just been focusing on surviving or reacting to the plot circumstances. But at the midpoint, they kind of deeply consider themselves and what they want and what they think, and they decide not to be a victim. They decide now they're going to take action and figure things out and control their destiny. They try to do that from the midpoint on. So then you get the second pinch point, which is another smaller battle with the antagonist forces, and then probably Dark Night of the Soul, which is where the antagonist forces win or appear to win. So you have a big battle. The protagonist, the hero, is trying to do something. Generally, through their own actions, by trying to take action, they screw things up even more. They hurt someone that they love, or the antagonist gets exactly what they wanted, and they were just playing the protagonist the whole time. At the Dark Night of the Soul, the hero basically gives up. Like in the midpoint, they had energy to try to go after what they wanted, but at the Dark Night of the Soul, they basically give up because they've lost. Everything is terrible. They've had some major setbacks. Then a helper or a friend gives them a pep talk and convinces them to fight back, or something else happens and they realize that, you know, it's not over or whatever. They have to be given a bigger reason to follow through and to keep going after their goals. So then you have another final battle, which is the final battle, where the antagonist and the protagonist face off. But now that the protagonist has gone through this whole cycle and they've discovered themselves, they've uncovered their strength or their powers, now they finally have whatever they needed to defeat the antagonist. And that's basically the end of the book. Then you might have like a wrap-up chapter or something which explains some of the missing details. That's basically it. So that's how I plot. I've broken it down because I think there's a lot of other steps, but I think just with those basic steps, for most popular fiction in most genres, if you follow that outline and you hit those major plot points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 major plot points. So that's not too many to remember. Doesn't matter exactly where they come to. I used to, like when I started writing, I would outline the entire, I think I want to say it was Plot Perfect, but I might be wrong, where it was 60 chapters and each quarter of the book was 15 chapters. And I did that for a couple of books, and I tried to map out exactly what happens. And there's stuff like, this chapter is positive feeling and this chapter is negative feeling, and they switch back and forth. A lot of that stuff now I don't plan out so much. It really helped when I was getting started because I had trouble finishing a book and plotting a book. So doing that stuff really did help me to get through plotting a whole book, because you really need to plot an entire book and a story arc before you can write it. But now, for newer books, I'll mostly just map out those big 8. Like, those are the big 8 shifts that have to happen, and then I'll fill in the blanks between them. And it may not be the exact same length between each part. But as long as they're in there and they're recognizable and they're noticeable, if you have those, they're going to satisfy readers, because readers expect certain stories resonate with them because they've been trained to react a certain way to stories. So if you look at like any blockbuster movie, it will all have basically the same structure, and that's something that readers and viewers get used to and they expect in a really good story. So if you can hit those major points, you're basically, and this was something like, this story architecture goes back to the Greeks, and they were writing tragedies or comedies that were structured very well for the maximum catharsis, which is just they would bring you through an emotional interior experience so that you would leave edified by what you've gone through. And so that's the purpose of your book. It's not just entertainment. It's more than just a lot of action. You want it to really go through and open up different receptive channels in the reader. So it's not just one emotion. So they're feeling like a lot of ups and downs, a lot of flips, so that when they get through it, they've had this experience with you. That's what you're kind of shooting for your fiction. Anyway, I'll leave the links around, or you can look for the plot dot if it's helpful. Oops. Thanks for watching this video. Bye-bye.